All right, weather roll for the next set of impulses in May, June. Weather roll is an 8 and an 8 in the May, June column. It is going to be fair everywhere and it advances one box on the impulse track. So good news for the Germans, not so good news for the Western Allies. All right, there's no declaration of war yet from the Italians or any of the other Axis powers. The Germans are going to do another land action, and they're going to pay the 10/10 oil to fully fuel that action. The Japanese are also going to do a land action, but they're going to pay as they go with oil. And the Italians are doing a combined as well. So they're not too much here. The Germans are probably be moving up some forces to continue to press the attack here. The Japanese are going to do some landings out in Asia in anticipation of making some attacks against the new Chinese line. I'll go ahead and get some movement done, and we'll check back and see if the Axis are going to launch any further attacks this impulse. Well, in a relatively quiet impulse for the Japanese, they've moved Yamamoto up out of Canton here to clear the way to land some units at sea. The militia unit in Fuchao moved down the coast, allowing the Marines to land here. They want to get the Marines in this hex up into the front line before they make any attacks in this area down here. Hopefully the weather will hold out for them. If not, maybe they'll press ahead anyway. They did, however, manage to form a solid line here in China now, and it's a question of how quickly they can push the Chinese back. The mountainous terrain here is kind of slowing things down a bit, which is to be expected. So that's it for the Japanese. They will look to press their attack further in the turn. Let's go see what the Germans ended up doing this impulse. Back in France, the French may have made a fatal mistake last impulse when they left Paris unoccupied. The Germans have pushed their units forward, reinforcing the breakthrough here. And looking at it, this hex, these units are all totally inverted. The Germans have one attack to make, and they're going to attack right here. It's going to be a blitz attack, thanks to the mechanized unit in this hex, and it's a total of 36 to 12. And they're going to have +3 for all of the units inverted, +4 because they have more armor attacking than defending on the blitz, which means that a 3-to-1 +4, they'll take the hex. If they roll a 2 or better, they'll actually be able to break through and occupy Paris with this very attack. So that being the case, the French now have to decide. The Germans have no HQs eligible to provide offensive HQ support. Predelat is eligible to provide defensive support. If he does, he will subtract 1 from the die roll, making it a +3 instead of a +4, and making it that much harder for the Germans to get into Paris. If he does, however, he will be face down and he'll essentially be stuck in this hex for the rest of the turn. But I don't think they've got much of a choice at this point, so he will go ahead and provide the defensive HQ support, doing whatever he can to desperately try to hope the Germans roll low here. Germans are going to need, like I said, with a +3 now at 3-to-1 on the blitz. I believe it's a 3 or better in order to get a blitz result, allowing them to exploit into Paris. So let's see what they end up rolling here. This is the fate of France hangs on this die roll. Let's see what happens. Oh, it is a 2. I don't know if we could see that real well. A 2. So Predelat may have saved the day. 2 + 3 gives us a 5. It's going to be Germans lose 1, and it is a retreat result for the French. All of the Germans are going to be turned face down. So it turns out to be a bit of an expensive gamble. They have to lose a unit that gives them the blitz, the +1 for the armor attack and the blitz. So they will, that's a 5. That's an expensive little self-propelled artillery. They'll go ahead and they'll get rid of their mechanized corps. And the French retreat. Now, the attacker retreats the defenders in World in Flames. So rather than having them retreat into Paris, the Germans are going to push them off to this hex here, where they would all be turned face down. The Germans can still occupy the hex, and that's precisely what they're going to do. They're going to send these two units in, as well as that unit, and then everyone is going to be turned face down. So for the moment, Paris has been saved, although the Germans are now knocking on the front door of Paris, and French options are looking more and more slim. The Germans will, let's see, they've got, they'd like to get some of these guys reorganized, and they've got von Bock here who can do it, and I think they've got, where did they move? See down here. And von Lieb is out of range. So if they're going to get these guys face up, they're going to have to commit von Bock, which is going to, he's in a bad position to be face down for the rest of the turn. They may end up having to expend some more offensive points to get either von Bock or von Rundstedt back face up, but he will allow 3 of the units to be turned back face up, and we will do these 2 here. Get the 2 core units, and we'll get this militia corps here, trying to maximize their offensive power for the rest of the turn here. French position is, even with that poor die roll by the Germans, the French position is looking worse and worse at this point. So I think that's it for the reorganization, and that'll do it for the, actually, the Axis do have a couple of air rebases. I'm going to bring their 2 remaining face-up fighters forward. Okay. That should do it for the Axis second impulse. It's going to advance 1 box on the track, and it's over to the Allies. The Allies are looking at some way to try to salvage this situation, but it's not looking good. The Commonwealth is actually going to do a combined along with the Soviet Union and the USA. China and France are going to do a land. And we'll check back in a little bit and see what the French have been able to do as far as salvaging their line. All right, after the second Allied impulse, this is what the front looks like here in France. The French were able to stitch together their front line. They still have an intact front line. The Commonwealth, as you can see, has begun their evacuation. The Home Fleet sortie to cover some of the transports that picked up, I think it was Wavell and the Mechanized Corps. So the Commonwealth has at least gotten their most expensive units out of France before the collapse. But I did want to point out that both sides made a couple of big errors in their previous impulses. First, the French, by leaving Paris completely empty prior to the last German impulse, are very lucky that there isn't a German unit sitting in Paris right now. In fact, there should be a German unit sitting in Paris, but for the even greater mistake the Germans committed. The Germans start the scenario with 30 offensive points, and that's more than enough to spend what they did to grant Rundstedt the HQ benefits for the land action. But the Germans have been trying to get through France as cheaply as they could. And instead of using another big bunch of offensive points to have I think it's von Kleist, get those benefits. They opted not to do that. If they had given those benefits to von Kleist, he would have been able to double the attacking value of the units attacking this hex here in their last impulse. They would have been able to blitz right through here and waltz into Paris uncontested. And the French would have been very hard pressed to try to kick whatever German unit had entered Paris, kick them out of it by the end of the turn. The Germans would have been looking at installing Vichy at the end of May, June. Instead, they went the cheap route, took a gamble, and it failed when they rolled that 2 on their attack on this hex right here. So, as a result of trying to skate by as cheaply as possible, it's going to end up costing the Germans a lot more. They only have one more headquarters that's currently face up right now, and it is, I think, who is it? It is von Lieb, way over here in the east. He's only got 2 for his reorg value, so he's the worst HQ. But they may be looking at spending the offensive points that they were trying to save by not giving it to Kleist last impulse. On their upcoming impulse, they're probably going to blow through those offensive points and see if von Lieb can puncture the front. Because right now, if the French can hold on through the end of this turn, they're going to be getting a number of reinforcements. Remember that 2 of the units that were removed in the hexes, I think it was here and here in the initial German attacks, 2 of those units are coming back, and one of which is a headquarters unit. And in addition to that, they've got their normal production, which was going to arrive. So they're due to get 4 or 5 corps coming in next turn, plus whatever they build. If they have any militia or one-turn units, those will be coming on map. So if the French can hold on through the end of May, June, without the situation deteriorating from what they have here, they actually might be in decent shape to hold up the Germans for another, probably another 2 to 3 turns, especially if the Germans have blown through all of their stock of offensive points. So, word to the wise, if you're going to go for it, don't be stingy. Obviously, you don't want to waste resources, but there's a time and a place for expending something as valuable as an offensive point, or even something as valuable as inverting a headquarters unit in order to provide some offensive support or reorganize units. So the Germans are kind of kicking themselves for that mistake, because the Battle of France would essentially be over at this point if they had gone ahead and decided to spend those offensive points. But since they have not, the turn has no chance of ending at the end of the Allied second impulse. So the Germans should get at least 2 more impulses, depending upon the weather, and they've got good odds for the good weather to continue. So let's take a look and see what's going to happen here in the later portion of the May-June turn. See if the Germans probably will not be able to capture Paris in May-June. But if they can continue to do some more damage to the French, whose reserves are really running out, the weak militia unit here is literally the last reserve they have. Everything else they have is in the line right now. So any holes that the Germans can punch from here on out probably are not going to be able to be filled. Or if so, they're going to require a kind of a straightening of the line and abandoning some other hexes, which will work to the Germans' advantage. So let's see what the weather looks like for the upcoming Axis impulse.